Marriage, Adultery, and Divorce. Marriage in Heaven. The Sadducees, who claimed that there was no resurrection or life after death, came to Jesus with a question. "Teacher, Moses said, if a man dies without children, his brother must marry the widow and produce children for his brother. Once there was 7 brothers. The oldest got married, but died before having any children. So the next brother married the widow, and he died without having any children. The same thing happened to the 3rd brother, and so on till all 7 brothers had married the widow and died without producing any children. Last of all, the widow died. At the resurrection, whose wife will she be, since all 7 of them married her?" Jesus answered them, "The men and the women of this age marry, but the men and the women who are worthy to rise from death and live in the age to come will neither marry or be given in marriage, and they can no longer die, for they are like the angels. They are the children of God, because they have risen from death. And Moses clearly proves that the dead are raised to life. In the passage about the burning bush, he speaks of the Lord as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. He is the God of the living, not of the dead. For to him all are alive." This reading is from the New Testament, the book of Luke, chapter 20, verses 27 through 39, also found in the book of Mark, chapter 12, verses 18 through 27, and the book of Matthew, chapter 22, verses 22 to 33. Marriage in the last days. Jesus tells his disciples about the troubles, the persecutions, and the signs that will precede his return to earth and says, "No one knows, however, when that day and hour will come, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, for the Father alone knows." The coming of the Son of Man will be like what happened in the time of Noah. In the days before the flood, people ate and drank, men and women married, up to the very day Noah went on the boat. Yet they did not realize what was happening until the flood came and swept them all away. That is how it will be when the Son of Man comes. This reading is in the New Testament, the book of Matthew, chapter 24, verses 36 through 39. Adultery. As Jesus was teaching in the temple, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman who had been caught committing adultery, and they made her stand before them all. "Teacher," they said to Jesus, "this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. In our law, Moses commanded that such a woman must be stoned to death. Now what do you say?" They said this to trap Jesus, so they could accuse him. Jesus bent over and wrote on the ground with his finger. And as they were pressing him for an answer, he straightened up and said to them, "If any one of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone at her." A second time he bent down and wrote on the ground. And when they heard this, they all left, one by one, the older ones first. Jesus was left alone with the woman, who continued to stand before him. Jesus finally straightened up and said to her, "Woman, where did they all disappear to? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she answered. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Now go and sin no more." This reading is from the New Testament, the book of John, chapter 8, verses 1 through 11. Divorce. Jesus defines adultery. Some Pharisees came to Jesus and tried to trap him by asking him if it was permissible for a husband to divorce his wife. In reply, he said, "What command did Moses give you?" Their answer was, "Moses gave us permission for a man to write a divorce notice and send his wife away." Jesus told them, "Moses wrote that commandment for you because of your stubbornness. At the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. They are no longer two, but one. So man must not separate what God has joined together." When they got back into the house, the disciples asked Jesus about this matter. He said to them, "A man who divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery against his wife. In the same way, a woman who divorces her husband and marries another man commits adultery." This reading is from the New Testament, book of Mark, chapter 10, verses 2 through 12, also found in the book of Matthew, chapter 19, verses 1 through 12, and the book of Luke, chapter 16, verse 18. From the book of Matthew, Jesus is speaking. "It was also said, 'Anyone who divorces his wife must give her a written notice of divorce.' But now I tell you, if a man divorces his wife for any other cause than her unfaithfulness, then he is guilty of making her commit adultery if she marries again. And the man who marries her commits adultery also." This reading is found in the New Testament, the book of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 31 through 32. The book of Matthew, chapter 19, verses 1 through 12. And also Mark, chapter 10, verse 11 and 12. And Luke, chapter 16, verse 18.